The Pokemon anime is finally back. I'm so excited for the Corinna return because this week's episode was really underwhelming.
Pokemon Ranger, I choose you!
What's up, my dear boys and girls, it's your Ranger here, and welcome to, finally, after a 6-week hiatus, another review of Pokemon Journeys. Man, I will really miss the days when I called it Pokemon the Anime 2019, but we gotta start fresh, since we're welcoming back an old friend. And it comes back with episode 23, a massive panic at Sakuragi Park. And, well, let's go to the ratings. Yes, you heard right, the ratings are back, because in my opinion 23 episodes should be a good first impression in regards of what kind of direction the anime will go. So let's dive right into it. What can I say about the story? Maybe I'm a bit too harsh towards this episode since it's a comeback after 6 weeks of not having any kind of anime, and as a result of that, my personal expectations might have been a bit too high for this return episode. But even disregarding the circumstances of the real life world, man, this episode was boring! And not only was it boring, but also predictable as fuck. So in short, it was all about GOU's Pokemon having a conflict with one another after their food mysteriously disappeared, and thanks to them being both hungry and mistrusting towards each other, they start forming groups to fight each other. Then GOU's Golurk goes on a rampage thanks to that conflict, which then led to another dangerous situation where at the end of the day everybody worked together as a team to solve that danger. Friendship restored, and before the episode ends, it turns out that GOU's Squowit gathered all the food to store it because, you know, it's a squirrel Pokemon. And the episode started by focusing on him, and as soon as the food started to disappear, you could put one and one together. See what I did there? I summed up the episode in just a few seconds, but since this is a full-length episode, every aspect of this episode had to be dragged on and on and on, stretching it out even further. So even though I intended to not be so harsh on this episode at first, since it's the first Pokemon episode after a long while, the story overall was too much by the numbers, and also every aspect of this episode was unnecessarily long and stretched out. So sadly, I have to give this week's story a 3 out of 10. What can I say about the focus? If we look at the title called A Massive Panic at Sakuragi Park, you will know just from the title alone that there will be a major event happening to GOU's Pokemon, since they all reside in the Sakuragi institution. So from the very beginning, it was clear that the main focus of this week's adventure will be on them. And even though really nothing could have made this episode any better, at least the title card somewhat tried to make this episode sound a little bit exciting. So I guess I have to applaud them for that. 6 out of 10. Last but not least, animation. I will be honest, I really don't like when I have to talk about animation in a negative way, because the animation of Pokemon nearly always was the main highlight of nearly every episode. But sadly, this episode belongs to the category of no effort needed. For the most part, it concentrated more on the comedic aspect of the episode rather than the climax. And the fact that my main source, Sakugaburo, couldn't tell me anything about this episode and still is listing animations of episode 22 as the main highlight kinda tells the whole story. Heck, not even the evolution of GOU's Dustox could be considered even a decent animation. Don't get me wrong, guys. As much respect as I have for the animators of Pokemon, man, I have to give this a 4 out of 10. So this episode scores a 4.33 out of 10, and in short, no matter if it's the storyboard, the animators, or the fans, nobody, and I mean nobody, cared about this episode. And I'm desperately waiting for the Corinna return. Oh man, I really don't want to end this video on such a sour note, so want to talk about episode 22? Because that at least was much more entertaining. What can I say about the story? To sum up the story, it was about Ash and GOU traveling to Hoenn again to research the migration of Beautiflies. And during that research, Rabbifoot seems to either ignore GOU or just downright disobeys him on numerous occasions, while also seemingly not showing any kind of emotions towards his trainer. And therefore, our trap boy seems to be really worried about their relationship. And at first, our boys assume that this behavior is because of Rabbifoot being in his rebel years, aka puberty, until the other day, our heroes find out about Rabbifoot's nightly secret adventure of him teaching the resident Pokemon of the town how to properly dance to win a Pokemon dance battle. And during that dance-off, GOU witnessed something that he rarely, if ever, has seen. Rabbifoot actually being happy and actually smiling. And thanks to that, GOU thought that Rabbifoot only doesn't smile when he is around. So he seemingly leaves his partner behind without telling him. But he quickly regrets that decision and tries to tell him about his feelings. But the train doors already closed, and with tears running down his face, GOU will never see his Pokemon again. Psych! It turns out that Rabbifoot was already on the train and filled with happiness and love. GOU shares that love with an embarrassed Rabbifoot. So the story all in all was pretty average. First, let's talk about the good things, with one of them being that the episode took place in Hoenn. Why was that good? Because since the beginning of March, every episode took place in Kanto, which means that the Pokemon we have seen for the most part were Gen 1 Pokemon, with the exception of Riolu, but still in a Kanto environment. So just to see a different environment with different Pokemon was personally really refreshing. The second aspect I liked about this episode was the comedy. Yes, you heard right, Ranger actually enjoying some Pokemon anime comedy. In particular, all the scenes with Rabbifoot either ignoring GOU or disobeying him, and that's simply because the comedy was well balanced. Every comedic aspect between GOU and Rabbifoot was really good, from the screen time, the timing, the execution, and even the comedic faces. Every aspect of this episode's comedy was done really well and so genuine, and it really seems like that they have learned from Gen 7's past, where one of its major flaws was indeed the comedy, having both inappropriate comedic timing and exaggerated faces, and as a result of that, more than often was more distracting and off-putting rather than adding any value. Last but not least, I liked how the anime has further characterized Rabbifoot, with him seemingly being a kudere. The definition of a kudere is an individual who seems cold-hearted, distant, and emotionless on the outside, while on the inside he actually does care about his beloved ones, and more than often kudere are also leader types, and every detail of a kudere seems to apply to our beloved buddy Pokemon perfectly. And last but not least, I really liked the ending, with GOU realizing that Rabbifoot actually can show some emotions towards him, even though his partner is really pride about that. To me, it indicates that the two are starting to finally get on the same page with each other, and hopefully this will be the right step into the right direction, not only for their relationship, but also hopefully this will lead to something that makes GOU's overall goal and story a bit more exciting. I would be really disappointed if they would return to catching random Pokemon again. But even with all the positives, we have to talk about the average parts of this week's adventure as well. The first thing I want to point out is that both main climax scenes, aka the dance battle, and the releasing scene, well, both outcomes of those events were pretty predictable, and later on I will talk about the latter one. But anyway, even with the first viewing of the episode, I pretty much knew how it would end. The next not so good part of the episode was that this once again felt like another episode where you go to another region, but without anything major happening. But I will give this week's episode this much. At least it achieved something. Unlike, for example, the Sinnoh episode or the Johto one, where story-wise basically nothing happened and therefore felt like your typical Pokemon filler, at least in this one, Ash and GOU did do some research with the whole Beautifly migration phenomenon and what conditions the boys have to meet to actually witness said migration. With that being said, it still feels like just another throwaway regional episode, and the only thing that really saved it was the potential of both GOU and Rabbifoot starting to improve their relationship. So in short, I really like the characterization of Rabbifoot, the strengthening of GOU's relationship with his Pokemon, and the well executed comedy. But because of both outcomes of the episode climaxes were too predictable, and also the whole all region in one anime concept still feeling a bit underwhelming, I have to give the story a 8 out of 10. What can I say about the focus? The title is called Goodbye Rabbifoot, and man, the anime tried so hard. Both the title and the preview indicated one thing and one thing only, that GOU will release his Pokemon. Heck, even the episode itself tried its damnedest to squeeze out that possibility until the very last moment with the whole train scene, and Rabbifoot seemingly being gone forever. There's only one little problem, and that is that nobody believed it. From the very first time I saw the title, I knew that it was a bait and switch. And for the people who actually believe that, let me ask you a question. Do you really want to tell me that GOU would release the only Pokemon who is not only his first ever Pokemon, but also has an actual character, an actual backstory, and has a genuine relationship with him? Well, the only thing I can say is, nice try, Gen 8 anime. C grade for your efforts, or in my language, a 6 out of 10. What can I say about the animation? In short, there weren't really that many animation highlights. The Beautifly evolution was really decent, but nothing to write home about. The only animation which did stood out was the Rabbifoot dancing scenes, and only because of one thing. The animation was done by Takeshi Mainami, and the trademark of this specific animator seems to be what is known as smear. What I understood from watching several animations of Mainami is that smear seems to be that if every time an animation changes its movements, there's always an image in between two movements which seems to be kinda distorted, while also indicating that some kind of acceleration is taking place. Again guys, I haven't looked up the precise definition, but I think that I'm at least not totally incorrect, since every smear frame seems to be used as transition from one move to another, therefore indicating change in movements. And you can tell that every dance scene has been done by my Nami, because he uses this technique very often. For that alone I have to give more points than usual, but since this was basically the only animation highlight, I will give the animation a solid 7 out of 10. So the episode scores a solid 7 out of 10 and perfectly reflects what I think about this week's adventure. It really didn't do much to stand out, but at least it did enough to leave an overall positive impression on me. Anyway guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. It's good to be back, and it's good to have the anime back in action. But anyway, tell me your opinion, and just like always, I see you guys in the comments down below. Bye guys!